Now, what are the facts? The Jews, I call them Jews to you because they're known as Jews. I don't call them Jews. I refer to them as so-called Jews because I know what they are. If Jesus was a Jew, there isn't a Jew in the world today. And if those people are Jews, certainly our Lord and Savior was not one of them. And I can prove that. Now what happened? The Eastern European Jews, who form 92% of the world population of those people who call themselves Jews, were originally Khazars. They were a warlike tribe that lived deep in the heart of Asia. And they were so warlike that even the Asiatics drove them out of Asia into Eastern Europe. And to reduce this, so you don't get too confused about the history of Eastern Europe, they set up this big Khazar kingdom. 800,000 square miles. Only, there was no Russia, there were no other countries, and the Khazar kingdom was the biggest country in all Europe. So big and so powerful that when the other monarchs wanted to go to war, the Khazars would loan them 40,000 soldiers. That's how big and powerful they were. Now, they were phallic worshippers, which is filthy. I don't want to go into the details of that now. It was their religion, the way it was the religion of many other pagans or barbarians elsewhere in the world. Now, the king became so disgusted with the degeneracy of his kingdom that he decided to adopt a so-called monotheistic faith, either Christianity, Islam, the Muslim faith, or what is known today as Judaism, really Talmudism. So, by spinning a top, he said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and he picked out so-called Judaism. And that became the state religion, and he sent down to the Talmudic schools of Tel Aviv and Surah, and brought up thousands of these rabbis with their teachings, and he opened up synagogues and schools in his kingdom of 800,000 people, 800,000 square miles, and maybe 10 to 20 million people, and they became what we call Jews. There wasn't one of them that ever had an ancestor that ever put a toe in the Holy Land, not alone in Old Testament history, but back to time, the beginning of time. Not one of them. And yet they come to the Christians and they ask us to support their armed insurrection in Palestine by saying, well, you want to certainly help repatriate God's chosen people to their promised land, their ancestral homeland. We gave you one of our boys as your Lord and Savior. You now go to church on Sunday and kneel, and you worship a Jew, and we are Jews. Well, they were pagan Khazars who were converted just the same as the Irish. And it's just as ridiculous to call them people of the Holy Land as it would be. There are 54 million Chinese Muslims. 54 million. And Muhammad only died in 620 AD, so in that time, 54 million Chinese have accepted Islam as their religious belief. Now imagine in China, 2,000 miles away from Arabia, where the city of Mecca is located, where Muhammad was born, imagine if the 54 million Chinese called themselves Arabs. Imagine. Why, you'd say they're lunatics. Any man that believes that those 54 million Chinese are Arabs must be crazy. All they did was adopt as a religious faith a belief that had its origin in Mecca, in Arabia. The same as the Irish. When the Irish became Christians, nobody jumped then in the ocean and imported from the Holy Land a new crop of inhabitants that were Christians, that had Christian flesh and blood. They weren't different people. They were the same people, but they had accepted Christianity as their religious faith. Now these pagans, these Asiatics, these Turco-Finns, they were a Mongoloid race who were forced out of Asia into Eastern Europe. They likewise, because their king took the faith, the Talmudic faith, they had no choice. Just the same as in Spain. If the king was Catholic, everybody had to be a Catholic. If not, you had to get out of Spain. So everybody, they lived on the land just like the trees in the bushes. A human being belonged to the land under their feudal system. So they all became what we call today Jews. Now imagine how silly it was for the Christians, for the great Christian countries of the world to say, we are going to use our power, our prestige to help repatriate God's chosen people to their ancestral homeland, their promised land. Now, could there be a bigger lie than that? Could there be a bigger lie than that? And because they control the newspapers, the magazines, the radio, the television, the book publishing business, they have the ministers in the pulpit, they have the politicians on the soapboxes talking the same language, so naturally you believe black is white if you heard it often enough. You wouldn't call black black anymore, you'd start to call black white, and nobody could blame you. Now, that is one of the great lies, that is the foundation of all the misery that has befallen the world.
Staying focused for Jesus.
Thanks for waking up with us.
Zionism is a nationalist movement that espouses the establishment of and support for a homeland for the Jewish people centered in the area roughly corresponding to what is known in Jewish tradition as the Land of Israel, which corresponds in other terms to the region of Palestine, Canaan, or the Holy Land, on the basis of a long Jewish connection and attachment to that land. Modern Zionism emerged in the late 19th century in Central and Eastern Europe as a national revival movement, both in reaction to newer waves of antisemitism and as a response to Haskalah, or Jewish Enlightenment. Soon after this, most leaders of the movement associated the main goal with creating the desired homeland in Palestine, then an area controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Theodor Herzl, born May 2, 1860, deceased July 3, 1904, was an Austro-Hungarian Jewish lawyer, journalist, playwright, political activist, and writer who was the father of modern political Zionism. Herzl formed the Zionist organization and promoted Jewish immigration to Palestine in an effort to form a Jewish state. Although he died before Israel's establishment, he is known in Hebrew as Chosei Hamadina, visionary of the state. Herzl is specifically mentioned in the Israeli Declaration of Independence and is officially referred to as the spiritual father of the Jewish state, i.e. the visionary who gave a concrete, practicable platform and framework to political Zionism. What are the roots of antisemitism that has given rise to how antisemitism is used today? Can the words of Theodor Herzl himself tell us? I think so. What catalyzed Herzl's conversion to Zionism was the Dreyfus Affair in France. In 1894-95, Alfred Dreyfus, a French Jewish officer, was wrongfully convicted of treason and confined to Devil's Island. The trial triggered a wave of anti-Semitism in the cradle and bastion of Western European liberal democracy. This wave of French anti-Semitism was the prime motive behind Herzl authoring The Jewish State or Der Judenstaat, which appeared in 1896 under the subtitle of An Attempt at a Modern Solution of the Jewish Question. Righteous Victims, page 20. Just before Herzl died in 1904, he had succeeded in securing a majority in favor of settling Russian Jews in Uganda as offered by the British. Herzl refused to accept that Palestine alone must be the Zionist goal, and a state of armed peace was declared. As soon as he died in July, the Uganda scheme was finished, and his death effectively killed it. Israel, A History, page 21. In 1895, Herzl, the founder of Zionism, wrote in his diary, "We must expropriate gently the private property on the state assigned to us. We shall try to spirit the penniless population across the border by procuring employment for it in the transit countries, while denying it employment in our country. The property owners will come over to our side. Both the process of expropriation and the removal of the poor must be carried out discreetly and circumspectly. Let the owners of the immovable property believe that they are cheating us, selling us things for more than they are worth. But we are not going to sell them anything back." America and the Founding of Israel, page 49, Righteous Victims, page 21 to 22. Benny Morris, the Israeli historian, described how Herzl foresaw how anti-Semitism could be harnessed for the realization of Zionism. He stated, Herzl regarded Zionism's triumph as inevitable, not only because life in Europe was ever more untenable for Jews, but also because it was in Europe's interests to rid the Jews, and relieved of anti-Semitism, the European political establishment would eventually be persuaded to promote Zionism. Herzl recognized that anti-Semitism would be harnessed to his own Zionist purposes. Righteous Victims, page 21. Regarding anti-Semites, Theodor Herzl explained how it could benefit the Zionist enterprise. He wrote in his diary, "The anti-Semites will become our most loyal friends. The anti-Semites' nations will become our allies." One Palestine Complete, page 47. Golda Meir was an Israeli politician and teacher who served as the fourth Prime Minister of Israel from 1969 to 1974. She was the first woman to become head of government in Israel. This is a well-known fact, but rarely spoken about. One must wonder why, especially being the first woman to be the leader of the State of Israel and 1 year after the famous year of 1968 in Israeli history. Golda, maiden name Mabovich, was born to a Jewish family in the downtown of Kiev, Russian Empire, present-day Ukraine, on May 3, 1898. Could this be part of the reason America is so deep in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine? Is this also why Ukrainians have shown such hostility, racism, and hatred towards blacks in the country while fleeing for their lives? It seems the world is so dark that even in the midst of bombs dropping and body parts flying, people find a way to shine the darkness outwardly, hidden inwardly within their hearts. In 1914, after disagreements with her sister, Golda left North High School, moved out of her sister's home, and found work. After reconciling with her parents, she returned to Milwaukee and resumed studies at North Division High, graduating in 1915. While there, she became an active member of Young Pol Zion, which later became Habnim, the labor Zionist youth movement. She spoke at public meetings and embraced socialist Zionism. When Golda and Morris married in 1917, settling in Palestine was her precondition for the marriage. Golda had intended to make Aliyah straight away, but her plans were disrupted when all transatlantic passenger services were canceled due to the entry of the United States into the First World War. She threw her energies into Pol Zion activities. A short time after their wedding, she embarked on a fundraising campaign for Pol Zion that took her across the United States. The couple moved to Palestine in 1921, together with her sister Shana and her daughter, and her childhood friend Regina. They left for Palestine on the SS Pocahontas, sailing from New York to Naples and proceeding from there to Tel Aviv by ship and train. In Palestine, the couple joined a kibbutz. Meir's parents subsequently moved to Palestine in 1926. Meir said in the 1975 edition of her autobiography, My Life, that it is not only a matter, I believe, of religious observance and practice. To me, being Jewish means and has always meant being proud to be part of a people that has maintained its distinct identity for more than 2,000 years. With all the pain and torment that has been inflicted upon it. Golda strongly identified with Judaism culturally, a culture that includes the Talmud and many other blasphemous books, but she was no doubt an atheist in religious belief. She is famously reported to have stated, I believe in the Jewish people, and the Jewish people believe in God. An atheist is a godless person, one who denies the existence of a supreme, intelligent being to whom moral obligation is due. Without God, denying the gods, abandoned of the gods, godless, ungodly. The fool hath said in his heart, There is no God. They are corrupt, they have done abominable works, there is none that doeth good. What about Golda's strong secret love affair with Africa, along with Theodor Herzl's love affair with African Americans? More on him later. In an article published by the Jerusalem Post, by Yehuda Avner, February 8, 2006, Golda Meir saw Israeli assistance to the continent as a Jewish imperative. Consonant with the austerity of the beleaguered little country it spoke for, the Jerusalem compound of the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1959 was as drab and ordinary as a barracks. Inside its prefabricated conference room, 15 Foreign Service greenhorns sat stiffly upright in straight-backed chairs around an oblong table at whose head sat Israel's most celebrated model of straight-laced probity, Foreign Minister Golda Meir. She was confessing to her novices that she was having a love affair with Africa. In a tone full of conviction and in a Hebrew filled with Milwaukee-sounding pronunciations, she told us there were two things she wanted to drum into our heads. One is, coming to the aid of the newly independent African states is an emotional thing for me. It is a drive toward universal self-determination and justice which lies at the very heart of my labor Zionism. Indeed, my African policy is a logical extension of my socialist Zionist principles in which I have always believed. And the second thing is, she raised two fingers into AV, we Jews share with the African peoples a memory of centuries-long suffering. For both Jews and Africans alike, such expressions as discrimination, oppression, slavery, these are not mere catchwords. They don't refer to experiences of hundreds of years ago. They refer to the torment and degradation we experienced yesterday and today. Let me read to you something to illustrate the point. She picked up a book and opened it at a marked page. What I have here is a novel called Altneuland, Old New Land, written, as you should know, in 1902 by the founder of the Zionist movement, Dr. Theodor Herzl. She paused to rummage inside her copious black leather handbag from whose depths she extracted a pair of thick-rimmed spectacles which she perched on her bulbous nose. In it, Dr. Herzl describes the Jewish state of the future as he imagined it might be. I shall read to you what he said about Africa, and remember this was in 1902, there is still one question arising out of the disaster of the nations which remains unsolved to this day, and whose profound tragedy only a Jew can comprehend. This is the African question. Just call to mind all those terrible episodes of the slave trade, of human beings who, merely because they were black, were stolen like cattle, taken prisoner, captured and sold. Their children grew up in strange lands, the objects of contempt and hostility because their complexions were different. I am not ashamed to say, though I may expose myself to ridicule in saying so, that once I have witnessed the redemption of the Jews, my own people, I wish also to assist in the redemption of the Africans. Very interesting words for the spiritual father of the modern state of Israel. Everywhere we look we see a direct connection with the Jewish people of today, with what they went through, and the African Americans of today. If Theodor Herzl himself said he was going to assist in the redemption of the Africans, and one can conclude this would have put African Americans at the forefront, why is there such animosity towards African Americans today from those who support Theodor Herzl? These are facts that must be brought up to the right people and used to combat the lies being spread about African Americans today, simply because we claim to be the people of the Bible. Golda Meir's patrician features rearranged themselves into an earnest and dedicated expression, and her voice went husky when she avowed, "It has fallen to me to carry out Dr. Theodor Herzl's vision." Each year more and more African states are gaining national independence. Like us, their freedom was won only after years of struggle. Like us, they had to fight for their statehood. And like us, nobody handed them their sovereignty on a silver platter. There was now a glint of thrill in her clever eyes when she went on, in a world divided between the haves and the have-nots. Israel's nation-building experience is uniquely placed to lend a helping hand to the new Africa. We have a vast amount of expertise to offer. For this purpose, I have set up a new division for international cooperation, and you people are going to help staff it. We are going to send out to the new African states scores, even hundreds, thousands of Israeli experts of every sort, technologists, scientists, doctors, engineers, teachers, agronomists, irrigation experts. They will have but one task, to unselfishly share their know-how with the African people. So now you understand why Africa is an emotional thing for me? She leaned into her chair, combed back her blonde hair with the fingers of both hands, lit up a cigarette, and eyeing us through the flame of the match, said, "Does anybody want to ask me a question?" A hand went up. "Are you not afraid the Africans will view us as the new colonialists?" "No, I'm not. Unlike the Europeans, Israel is totally free of the taint of colonial exploiters. And unlike wealthy America, we can't offer money to win influence. What we have to offer is our nation-building experience, nothing else, no strings attached. Few developing countries in the world have accomplished what we have accomplished. As a new country, we built ourselves up from scratch. Now they, as new countries, are starting from scratch. We have the know-how, a vast reservoir of practical experience to share with them. All we ask from Africa in return is friendship. No political quid pro quo, no UN votes, nothing at all. Somebody had the temerity to ask." Golda Meir took a puff of her cigarette, inhaled deeply, pursed her lips, and gazed over our heads at the ringlets of smoke spiraling one by one and expanding wreaths from her mouth to the ceiling. Then, in a small voice, she said, "At the end of the day, what we give to Africa we give without conditions." "But why not something political in return?" asked the same questioner, persistent. The foreign minister settled her elbows on the table, steepled her fingers, threw the doubter an expression of disapproval, and, with exasperation, said, "Have I not got through to you that this is a matter of principle, of ideology, of Zionist faith?" She stubbed out her cigarette and brooded over an amethyst brooch pinned to the lapel of her plain black jacket, clearly pondering her next thought. When it came, her voice went stubborn. "Of course I am hoping for something in return, but I won't say so in public. And I'm not counting on it. Let me tell you neophytes why I'm not counting on it." She stood up, stretched her shoulders, and began prowling the length of the room, arms rigid, head down, talking nonstop in whole paragraphs. "When I'm at the United Nations, I look around me and think to myself, we have no family here. Israel is entirely alone, less than popular, and certainly misunderstood. All we have to fall back on is our own Zionist faith. Why should this be so? Why such solitude? Why is it that we are the only country in the world which is Jewish? Why are there not more Jewish states, just as there are so many Christian states, Muslim states, Hindu states, Buddhist states? Why are we the one country in the world whose language is Hebrew? Why are there not more Hebrew-speaking countries, like there are English-speaking, Arabic-speaking, French-speaking, Chinese-speaking? No other country in the world shares our language, our religion, our history. Everybody in the United Nations is grouped into blocks, bound by a common geography, or religion, or history, or culture. They vote together in solidarity. We have nobody. Our most natural regional allies, our Arab neighbors, don't want anything to do with us. Indeed, they want to destroy us. So we really belong nowhere and to no one except to ourselves, impelled by our own Zionist faith. The one blood tie, the one kindred bond we have with anybody at all in the world is with our fellow Jews in the diaspora, and everywhere they are a minority. And nowhere do they enjoy any form of national or cultural autonomy. But now, her voice went gritty. Independent African states are beginning to emerge, and I want to leapfrog over our hostile neighbors and build bridges of fellowship to them. So, yes, I hope for something in return, but no, I don't count on it. This extraordinary woman, then in her early 60s, born in Russia and raised in Milwaukee. Once a kibbutz pioneer and married to a man, Morris Meyerson, who gave up on her because he could not keep up with her relentless labor Zionist ardor. Spoke that day as if there was such a thing as an all-conquering Zionist faith that need not bow to overwhelming odds. Her will to pit the Zionist faith against the rest of the world, was what would enable the Jewish state to transcend the regional isolation imposed by the Arab states and extend its vision far beyond its frontiers to Africa. In this distilled version of her Jewish worldview, Golda Meir made no attempt to answer her own formidable question. Why, indeed, was the Jewish state without sovereign kith or kin in the family of nations? By her account, Zionist faith was the equalizing factor in international affairs. She stated this as if it was an unyielding fact of diplomatic life. As for Foreign Minister Golda Meir's bold African initiative, she did succeed in building up a vast structure of assistance programs across that continent. But then came the Yom Kippur War, 1973, and it all fell to pieces overnight when African leaders severed relations with the Jewish state and roundly censured its Prime Minister, Golda Meir. As we sit here in 2023, knowing a tree by its fruit, we see the fruit of the vision they had pumping through the veins of many Hebrew Israelites around the world who are black. We see the compromise to get back to the land of our forefathers, not by the power of the Most High God, but by the same power that established the modern state of Israel. Many Jewish leaders are starting to speak up in support of Hebrew Israelites here in America, but is there a motive behind it? Is it to include them in Zionism and keep the child as a child, while the gatekeepers continue to control the gate? Now I say, that the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be lord of all, but is under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the father. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of the time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And because ye are sons, God hath sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Wherefore thou art no more a servant, but a son, and if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. It is not us who have the true Messiah that needs them, but it is them who needs us. In Christ we have everything we need, including our nation lead and headed by Christ himself, not the Antichrist. The future is the past coming to pass. I say again, the future is the past coming to pass. When we study and understand the past, for there is nothing new under the sun, we understand the future that much more. Israel once made a covenant with death, with Satan, just as they did in Egypt, with the golden calf, and so many other times. They will once again make a final covenant with Satan under the New World Order, Nesra, Gesara, the Great Reset, the Global Reset, for he shall confirm the covenant with many. This covenant is first confirmed with the true physical Hebrew Israelites of the flesh, which leads to a false exodus. Many will believe this man of color Messiah is in fact the Messiah, but he will be the man of sin. One must ask themselves, why do majority of those who are called and labeled black Hebrew Israelites completely skip over the time of Jacob's trouble, the worst time there will ever be, starting first and foremost with the true descendants of Israel? And he said unto me, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak unto thee. And the Spirit entered into me when he spake unto me, and set me upon my feet, that I heard him that spake unto me. And he said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that hath rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me, even unto this very day. For they are impudent children and stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them, and thou shalt say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God. And they, whether they will hear, or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house, yet shall know that there hath been a prophet among them. And thou, son of man, be not afraid of them, neither be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns be with thee, and thou dost dwell among scorpions. Be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. And thou shalt speak my words unto them, whether they will hear, or whether they will forbear, for they are most rebellious.